Welcome to this explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here today because we're diving into something truly monumental. Picture this. It's a newly independent India. The nation is literally born amidst the immense, chaotic trauma of partition, and the survival of the country itself is on the line. And yet, right in the thick of all that, India's leaders decide to take on the colossal, almost unbelievable goal of instituting a full-fledged democracy. It was an audacious gamble for sure. So today, we're going to explore exactly how they managed to pull off the first decade of electoral politics using some incredible source material to guide us.
Okay, let's dive right into this. We've got a great roadmap for our journey today. First up, we'll look at the democratic gamble. Then, we'll get into the logistical nightmare of actually organizing the vote, followed by the first mega election itself. After that, we'll break down the Congress juggernaut, take a surprising detour with the Kerala surprise, and wrap the whole thing up with a legacy of democracy.
Part 1. The Democratic Gamble. Let's set the global scene right after independence, when just keeping the nation together was the ultimate test.
You see, India's choice was a massive, unprecedented gamble. At the time, leaders in a lot of other newly independent countries looked at the sheer chaos of nation-building and decided, well, they simply couldn't afford democracy. They figured national unity had to come first, and democracy would just stir up dangerous conflicts. So their default was usually nominal democracy controlled by one leader, strict one-party states, or even direct army rule. India faced those exact same challenges, but our leaders chose the much harder path. They didn't view politics as the problem. They saw democratic politics as the actual solution for resolving differences and pursuing the public interest.
And make no mistake, they absolutely knew the risks. Listen to this powerful warning Dr. B.R. Ambedkar gave to the Constituent Assembly in 1949. In politics, hero worship is a sure road to degradation and eventual dictatorship. This perfectly anchors what was at stake here. The architects of the Constitution knew that to build a real democracy, they couldn't just rely on the charisma of a single hero. They had to build a rock-solid system that relied on the voice of the people.
Which brings us to Part 2, a logistical nightmare. When Sukumar Sen stepped up as the first chief election commissioner in January 1950, they honestly thought the election would just take a few months. Boy, were they wrong.
Just let this mind-boggling number sink in for a second. 17 crore. That's 170 million eligible voters. This massive electorate had to be completely organized to elect about 3,200 MLAs and 489 members of the Lok Sabha. Think about that. Before a single vote can be cast, you have to draw the boundaries for every single constituency. That's called delimitation, and then individually register 170 million people.
But wait, here is the real kicker. Out of those 17 crore voters, only 15% were literate. So how on earth do you hold a secret ballot when 85% of your voters can't even read the names on the paper? This shockingly low literacy rate meant the Election Commission had to basically invent a new way to vote from scratch and train over 3 lakh officers just to pull it off.
And the hits just kept coming. When they published the first draft of the electoral rolls, they found something jaw-dropping. 4 million women were completely left off the list by name. They were literally just written down as wife of or daughter of someone. Sukumar Sen and the Election Commission boldly said, "No way, we are not accepting this." They ordered a massive, nationwide revision to make sure those women were registered with their own actual identities.
All right, Part 3, the first mega election. With the boundaries drawn and the massive voter rolls finally ready, the stage was set. And this wasn't just huge for India, this was a global first.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the sheer evolution of the voting process. On one side, we have the modern electronic voting machine. But on the other side, that's the brilliant solution the Election Commission dreamed up for that largely illiterate electorate back in the 1950s. They assigned distinct everyday visual symbols to each political party, like a pair of bullocks, a hut, or an elephant. It's so simple, but it was a real game changer. It allowed millions of citizens to secretly and confidently cast their vote, whether they could read or not. I absolutely love this cartoon because it perfectly captures what the rest of the world was thinking. See the young Indian character writing that massive, heavy book titled Indian Democracy, sitting right there with France, the USA, and Canada? Back then, the global consensus was basically that democracy only works in rich places like Europe or North America, where everyone is wealthy and educated. But India was writing a completely new playbook, proving to the world that universal adult franchise could actually work in a poor developing nation.
Part 4. The Congress Juggernaut. So, the great experiment worked, the elections happened, but who actually won? Let's look at the undeniable era of one-party dominance.
To really get why Congress dominated the first 3 general elections so completely, we have to look at the analysis from scholars like Rajni Kothari. Congress wasn't some strict, narrow ideological club. It was a massive, sweeping social coalition. Sure, it started as an English-speaking urban elite, but the freedom struggle changed all that. They brought together completely contradictory groups. We're talking peasants alongside wealthy industrialists, and villagers right next to urbanites. And crucially, they actually tolerated diverse ideological factions within their own ranks.
Check out this brilliant political cartoon by Shankar. It totally nails the balancing act Congress was pulling off. Because it was such a giant coalition, Congress essentially acted as the ruling party and its own opposition at the exact same time. Normally, internal factions would tear a party apart, right? But here it was a strength. It gave different groups a way to negotiate power under one big umbrella, keeping the juggernaut rolling.
Part 5. The Kerala Surprise. Because as it turns out, that Congress dominance wasn't an absolute guarantee everywhere.
Fast forward to 1957, and the mighty Congress takes a historic, shocking hit at the state level. In the Kerala Assembly elections, the Communist Party won 60 out of 126 seats, forming the government with the help of 5 independents. EMS Namboodiripad was invited to form the ministry. This was literally unprecedented. It was the very first time anywhere in the world that a communist government came to power through free, democratic elections.
Let's move to the next part and see how this builds, because it sparked a massive constitutional controversy. As you can see in these historic clippings, Congress, reeling from the loss, kicked off a liberation struggle against the new state government. And then, in 1959, the Congress-led central government stepped in and used Article 356 of the Constitution to actually dismiss the elected Kerala government entirely. Our sources note this was highly controversial, and it's widely cited as one of the very first major instances of misusing constitutional emergency powers in independent India.
Finally, Part 6, A Legacy of Democracy. Let's bring it all together. What is the ultimate takeaway from this incredible first decade? Well, despite the bumps along the road, the great gamble actually paid off. The bedrock of India's democratic machine was set. But that era of absolute Congress dominance, that was just phase 1. You see, the very thing that made the party so powerful, its ability to be this giant catch-all coalition, eventually started to crack. As their ability to keep every single contradictory faction happy steadily declined, those internal groups started breaking away. And as they did, other political parties waiting in the wings finally started gaining serious ground. Which leaves us with a truly fascinating question to ponder. As the ultimate political coalition begins to fracture, who steps up to fill the void in the world's largest democracy? The first 10 years proved, against all odds, that the system could work. But the real chaotic test of a multi-party democracy was only just beginning. It's wild to think about how those early, impossible logistical hurdles laid the foundation for the massive, highly competitive elections we see today. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep analyzing those sources, keep asking the big questions, and I'll catch you next time.